Well, first of all, I'll just introduce myself. I've been here at BYU for about 6 years, a little over 6 years. Prior to that, spent 20 plus years in industry working with organizations that train employees and test employees on their job skills. And so I have a lot of background in what do people do and how do they show that they can do things. And so that's kind of where I come into assessment, a lot of measurement background, really boring psychometric stuff. And when I say that I've been a psychometrician, people kind of stop at the psycho part and don't think of the rest. So, but we have a lot of information out there of how people learn and how we know that they learn. And so hopefully we'll be able to share a lot of that with you in the 35, 40 minutes that we have here. But in light of that, we only have 35, 40 minutes or so to have this little discussion. I would like to know what you've been thinking. Lynn asked you to think of just one or two things that you would like to get out of here. What prompted you, besides the great food and the great company, what prompted you to come for this topic? And so because PowerPoint is not necessarily linear, I'm going to branch out and have a slide right here. And I want to jot down just a few things that you say. So why don't we start over here with Stephen. Anything you would like to, what's the driving thing on assessment you would like to hopefully get out of this session? Okay, you might not necessarily have to if it doesn't apply with your domain. That's great. Okay, and Suzanne, anything? Okay, great. Okay, now by doing this, the main thing I want to do is get you thinking about the things, what you want to get out of this. And I really recommend what Elder Scott said in conference, that when he was talking about classes in church, but I think it applies here as much as anywhere else, that as we come into a meeting and a learning setting, as we have our own things that we're concerned about, those are kind of on our minds, are handy with a piece of paper. I might say something that's not directly related to one of these things, but it will prompt a thought that you might have, and I encourage you to write that down. So if you're writing it down or you whisper to someone next to you, I'm not offended. I hope this is an interactive thing cognitively with how you are looking at your work and what you do. So as things are discussed as we go through this, and I'm talking about something that prompts a thought about daily assessment, just write it down. The other thing I wanted to do is I'm a big fan and proponent of following up on these things. We don't have much time to cover all this. I will try to blend this in as we discuss, but we are here. We're in the game here at the university, and so I'm committed to follow up with you in any way. So you're welcome to call me, call your consultant that's assigned to your college to follow up on any of these things to really deliver what you feel your needs are in this. So that's what this little exercise was for. So let's back to death by PowerPoint. So here's your list, and so I do want to come back to this. And but as we think about our students, we're thinking about assessing for student learning. So grading is just, in my mind, is a very small piece of this. We assess, we want to know what students are doing, how they're learning. And from that, we can pull the things we need to satisfy requirements for giving grades. And so I want to kind of set that aside for a bit. I just want us to think about assessing to know whether or not students are learning. And so first of all, we have to consider our students. When they come to class, a lot of times it's just the deer in the headlights thing. And how do we know what that student knows? I mean, and if you have 100 of them looking the same way at you, we want to know what they know. And so a lot of times they take us very literally, so we have to be very careful of how we present the opening of the class, what's expected, what's going to happen, and especially when we get into assessments, have them perform something. They take us literally in what we do. So here's an example, if this thing will work. Okay, here's a kid taking a test. The instructions, all answers must be in the form of complete sentences. So he gets questioned, why was the Panama Canal constructed? Answer, in the form of complete sentences. Okay. okay, it's an exaggeration, obviously. That's why it makes it humor and that. But students do take us very seriously. They want to know the parameters, what's going on, because they want to perform. They know we're going to have them jump through hoops. How big is the hoop? Is there fire in the hoop? Is there, what's on the other side of the hoop? Am I going to land flat, go down 12 stories after I get through it? What's going to happen? And so they want to know what's going on. And so that's what our discussion is. Now, a lot of times we like to have one assessment that does everything. But it just won't happen. Okay, one exam, one learning experience is not going to do everything in order for us to gather all the information. This is actually, the Swiss knife people actually made this thing. It sells for like $1,400, it's a novelty thing, but that's real. Okay, this slide is a Bible story. And this is about an assessment that was given that was not helpful to the people taking the test. So the Gileadite took passage, so these are the enemies. The enemies took the Ephraimites. And so when the Ephraimites, which were escaped, said, "Let me go," the men of Gilead said unto him, "Art thou an Ephraimite?" If he said, "Nay," then said they unto him, "Say now Shibboleth." And he said, "Sibboleth." And then they went and killed them. Okay, so that's what I call a final exam, right? So this is an assessment that does nothing for the learning of the student. And how many times have, in our academic journey, have we taken an exam that just felt just like this? Okay, it happens. And so we don't want to be on that side of the assessment spectrum. Now, here's how the Savior assessed. He told the story of the Good Samaritan to the lawyer, skeptical lawyer. And he explained the story, and we know how it goes. And then he said, "Which now of these three thinkest thou was the neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves?" And the lawyer said, "He that showed mercy on him," or the Good Samaritan. And then said Jesus unto him, "Go and do thou likewise." That is a forward-propelling assessment. The lawyer learned. Then Jesus had them articulate what he learned and said, "Now go forward and do it." So we want to link. That's how learning happens, is we learn, we link it to what we've priorly learned, and then we're propelled to further learning and further experience as we go. So that, so to put it in more secular terms, we have our basic triangle of significant learning, where we have outcomes, where we plan what do we want our students to be or become at the conclusion of the learning that we do. And we have the engaging learning activities and our informative learning assessments. So that is where we need it to, and the lines here indicate alignment. So our learning activities are aligned with the outcomes and with the assessments and so forth. And when that's not aligned, then we don't have significant learning. If the assessments are not aligned with the outcomes or with what the students have already been learning, then the assessments don't tell us anything. So to structure that, we have Bloom's taxonomy. This is a revised version of Bloom's taxonomy. If you don't have this, is one of my standard handouts, which I didn't provide here right now, but I can get this to you at any time. And so they have different levels: the remember, understand, and up here, analyze. So if we had an outcome, let's say, to analyze something. So at the conclusion of this class or the conclusions of their degree, they should be able to analyze this sort of thing. Then that should be listed in the outcomes, should be listed in the learning activities, that they actually do analysis type stuff. And when they get to the assessments and we're actually seeing if they can, we have them do that. It doesn't make sense to have them learn analysis and then only test them on what they've memorized in terms of the components of an analysis. It doesn't make sense. And so, but a lot of times we'll do that. So we have to be careful how we do that. So, and then here, Light wrote this about the types of courses that students appreciate and respect. And the specifics are these, and these all have to do with assessment. The things that are in a course that students enjoy and respect and feel like they've learned from it. It all has to do with assessment, that they get immediate and detailed feedback on their work. They're fine if the course has high demands and standards but they want to be able to grow in those high demands and standards. They want to be able to redo their work or learn from it and move forward in that. And they want frequent checkpoints. They want to be assessed often. You know, and the students say, oh no, midterms are coming up. It's probably, oh no, midterms are coming up because they don't know where they're at in their learning. They haven't had other chances to really assess or self-assess and know how they're doing. And so, come back to this, where we have the alignment issue. So in this case, I've highlighted verb 4, which is analyze. Just make sure that it's reflected in all the things that have to do with that outcome. Let me give you an example. Okay, this is my son, Daniel. This was when he was in high school. He was on the ballroom team, and part of their repertoire, they actually, in addition to the ballroom stuff they did, they put together a folk dance. They did the Ukrainian folk dance. And so this is him in one of the leaps that he did. And this was a hit in a lot of the school assemblies his senior year. And so members of his high school track team saw him do this, and he got some pretty good air in this move. And they said, we need a high jumper. And so they told the coach, they said, have you seen this guy, how much air he gets? He gets really up there, and we don't have a good high jumper. Let's get him on the team. And so the coach said, Daniel, come on, let's get on the team and do this. And in 2 weeks, he had a meet, and he could not clear the bar. He kept hooking it with his heel. You know, if the bar doesn't stay up there, you don't make the jump, no matter how high you get. And the coach got really angry with him. He said, come on, Daniel, it's only jumping. But you can kind of see right here just the different skill sets that were applied. And so for him to be learning this, here he is, a rock star, famous around the school for this kind of thing, and then be pulled into this where he's a failure. It kind of shows you where alignment comes into play in this. So I show this to you because I don't know your domains. I don't know how this relates to, you would know how this relates in your domain better than I do. But I show this to you just as an example that you could be teaching someone something and they would do really well in class, they do all this stuff, and then you throw an exam at them that does not relate to the exact skills and say, oh, well, I'm just trying to be robust and give them another, have another look at it. And yet, this is the one that counts the most when they've actually been mastering it very well. And so I just want to caution you about that, to be really thinking about it hard. When it's okay on the test, if they've been doing this, have them do this for the assessment and take a solid measurement. Where are you in this time? And get a solid assessment of where they're at. Any questions right now as we're going? I'm talking way too much, I feel. If you have, yeah, please.
So this relates to the objectives.
Right, yeah.
So the objective has to be such that they can go from the objective to the exam and perform well.
Right. And so the mental and physical, all the cognitive and physical things that Daniel would have to do this were beyond what he had time to learn for. And it wasn't within the standards that he had been learning. So he would not do well in that. And so the same thing applies in what our students are learning. So, but had he had enough time, he could have transferred a lot of that skills because he could get that high. He just didn't have the sequence. Once he goes up in the air, what do you do? Right here, when he's up in the air, he goes straight up and he has to touch his toes, which is, I can't even imagine doing that. That wasn't my skill in life. But in this case, it doesn't matter where his toes are as long as they clear the bar. And so it's a whole different skill set. A lot of times we don't even realize what we're doing. We just say, oh, just make it robust, make them thinking about it a different way. And then we get mad at them and say, well, it's just jumping. But yet it's just something they just haven't been able to make that transfer in their skills. So enough of that. So are we going backwards? Not sure why. Okay. I actually got this from Dave Wetton. Dave Wetton from the Faculty Center. He teaches management, and he's a big fan of two-way tables. And this is a good way to assess your assessments, see how they're doing. So what we have here are the learning outcomes and the level of, so you would write out your learning outcome here, of course, and you would indicate what level of Bloom's are actually, the Bloom's taxonomy or whatever taxonomy that you want to make sure are covered in this outcome. And so this test question, question 1, fulfills in this outcome the understanding. So if they get it right, they're reflecting that they understand the concept that's involved in the outcome. And they can actually apply the concept. But you'll notice from this test, none of these questions are fulfilling a create. If we have them create something within this domain or within this outcome, test question isn't helping with there. Okay, so this is helpful. Oh, I'm not really fulfilling my outcome completely. I'm contributing to it, and the test questions are good, but we'll just have to maybe do it another way. I'm not sure why this is going backwards. So we'll do this. Okay, so we have learning activities. Well, let's go with assignments first. Okay, now, just by coming to class, by me doing my job, I'm certifying in this that I'm getting them enough that they can understand and apply. But obviously, by coming to class, they're not necessarily creating. But when they get into their project work, oh, we're getting to create now. We're getting in group work and the term paper. Now we're getting that. So combined with the exam and with the work they're doing in class, we're now building on they're actually achieving the outcome, at least to a better level. And then in the learning activities, from those activities, we're actually achieving this. So this is a good exercise to do with your with the things you have your students do. And so I recommend doing that. Also, we have opportunities to teach our students how to self-assess. So this is just an example you could do. You can even do this on Blackboard. You don't even have to take class time to do it, or send a bulk email to everybody in the class with something like this. Okay, here's the schedule for the semester, the topics that are covered, or the outcomes. And here we are at week 4. You are here. Everybody's used to that. We all know going into malls, you don't know where you're at. You find the You Are Here map and find your way around. And so you just tell the students, at this point in the class, here's what you should be doing. And so you just give them whatever. I've got an example here, but whatever, wherever they should be at week 4. And then you can say, if you're not here, if you lack in any of these things, you better talk to me, or talk to your TA, or get with it, because the semester is going. And so it communicates that they know that you know where they should be, that you care about their progress, and they've got something a little stake in the ground. They can say, okay, here's where I should be, where am I really at? And it's very helpful to them. I've had students write back and thank me for doing this. I teach one evening section of Stats 221, which a lot of students have told me they'd rather have a root canal than take that class. Not because of me, but because of just the topic of the class.
Wasn't it 6 root canals?
Could be, yeah, and that'd be on a good day. So they've actually thanked me for this, because the class could get so cumbersome to them, and they only meet once a week, that they could find themselves really behind without realizing it. So this is a good method. It also teaches them some responsibility on their side. Okay, now, regardless of how you test or how you assess, there's lots of things that you do. And so I promote wholeheartedly the idea of many, many, many assessments throughout the semester in a class. Okay, it doesn't have to be this many, but you can group them in these kinds of things. So, we have formal exams, we have quizzes that come and go. This could be the Blackboard quizzes or informal things, projects, papers, in-class assessments. You do have a handout. I probably won't have time to go into it. This one right here, in-class learning. These are things you can do in class, or you could even structure them as a Blackboard kind of thing. I can talk to you more about that if you're interested in those. But depending on the quality, sometimes you just have students do something. And just by doing it, you can give them feedback in a general sense on what they've done. But you don't necessarily want to score it with a rubric. It's coming so fast, you might have so many students, but just the fact that they did it or didn't do it, then you get this thing where you give them 1 or 0 or 1 point. If they weren't in class or if they didn't do it, they don't get anything, but they get 1 point for doing it. But you've got them into the content. You actually have them doing things within the skill, within the cognitive skill that you're working with. And so as you accumulate those over the semester, you've got enough for an equivalent test score or a quiz score, however you want to do that. You aggregate those numbers together, and away they go. And plus, if they know points are attached, we know points are the currency on campus for students. They want to accumulate as much as they can. There's incentive here of coming into class or doing the Blackboard exercise, whatever you have them do, and they're actually engaged in the domain. They're actually doing stuff that you have them do. Any questions on this? Please.
So I'm trying to do something like this, right? I give a quiz every week, every Friday, and as well as a midterm and a final and other exams. So I gave a midterm this week, and then I came in with a quiz today into my class. My students were shocked that how can, we took a midterm this week. Why are you giving us a quiz? So how do you keep students from rebelling against having so many assessments?
Any thoughts on that? I've got some thoughts, but any? Please, yeah.
I was like, if I do something that's a common assessment that we do often, like quizzes, I'd let them drop their lowest score of 1. So if they take 1, or if they don't, they're not going to come. I mean, that kind of at least softens the blow of continual assessment that they give. They have the option to drop a couple or do something.
Okay, I would lay this out in your syllabus right up front. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I didn't think it was a surprise because it's on the syllabus.
Right. But a lot of times you have to keep reminding. So yeah, if you're going to do, students will rebel against a pop quiz that just kind of comes out of the blue. That's kind of a natural behavior of the animal. But if you have it in the syllabus and you're consistent with what you have in your syllabus of this, periodically, like every Wednesday I'm going to do this, or every so often, or at the conclusion of any instructional unit, I'm going to do this, then it's there. But you do need to have that consistency throughout, so they're, say, okay, this is what we expect, or we may not want it, but we expect it because it's there. Yeah.
I don't trust that rebellion either. It could be just students that knew there was a quiz, but wanted to vocalize a leverage point that they could use to make the teacher feel guilty.
No, we've seen that. No, that happens. Yeah, that's true. Okay, I think this will work now.
Just a quick question.
Please, yeah.
How do you deal with the student that gets so far behind? Of course, you could hand them a calculator and have them figure it out, but they haven't handed in. There's a number of things.
Oh,
Deal with just getting them to see some perspective and put the time where they need to, or not get so flustered, because there are a lot of things, and they start to add them up and go, I missed it.
right.
And then they say, I handed it to you, didn't you get it? Those sort of
Yeah. That's kind of a multi-pronged question that has, each student, they're kind of unique as their fingerprints on this kind of thing. But one thing might be how you weight these things, like the in-class things. Individually, they're worth a little bit, but collectively, they're worth a lot. So if you missed 3 or 4, it might not hurt, or now that you've missed 3 or 4, you better get the rest of them in, kind of thing. Or, you can, you kind of have to take on an individual basis. If they were, if they had some issues in their lives come up and you want to be sympathetic to that, you have that right. You can do that. If it's just their lack of attention to it, it would be a really good learning lesson for them. And so you do need to maintain your consistency and your standards through it. But and so if this just needs to be one of the hard life lessons for a student, hopefully they'll learn from it. But if they want to recover, I think I leave that open to you how you would want to handle that without disadvantaging the rest of the students who are attentive. So, yeah, this.
Just the
Would you?
talked about before, the do while they're here concept, you know, that actually would kind of working
Yes.
in what you're saying too, is if you're telling them where they're at all the way along the line,
Mhm.
they really have little complaint if they stay behind, you know. The other thing too, is the Blackboard, I believe, has some abilities to kind of flag you to show who's, you know, starting to get in trouble before the semester ends, you know. So you can hop on Blackboard and look at some of that maybe week to week and just see who's in trouble.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, did I see
That was
another?
the same thing I was
Okay.
going to say. I had the same problem, and I was getting flustered with trying to keep track of it, and I realized in Blackboard you can email them straight from Blackboard.
Mhm.
So you can look and see if they've got zeros, and then just email them straight from Blackboard. And so it doesn't take very much time to just do it.
I guess the question becomes whose responsibility is it? And sometimes it feels like the
I agree with
technology
you.
enables us to be then responsible.
Which it should be them, and I agree with you. It should be their responsibility, but it happens. And I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know if
Well,
we enable it more, but
No, you can, we can, I think if you set that up, the expectations right up front in the syllabus, you know, that you're really responsible for your learning. But then if you do these other low effort things like that you are here chart that I showed you, where it's just a general, you don't tell it to specific students, you just say, hi everybody, here's where you should be. And you just say, give a one message. If you're not, then you're responsible to contact me and we'll see what we can do. Did I see another?
Yeah, I think none of us want to give students grades based on the fact that they did not or did an assignment. You know, nobody wants to get a C because they failed to do half of them. And that's kind of the same kind of thing. So I don't know, email them is fine. But is this like a 6-credit class up here or something? I mean, that's like a
No.
my students would flip out. And plus, I don't have the grading power or the fortitude to really grade 12 assignments and 9 quizzes.
This is not an edict. This is just an example of what you can do. You know, you do your thing. I mean, you own your content, your course. You know, have.
Do you do this? Do you actually have
Do-
much in a semester?
I probably don't have as many projects and papers. I do. I have actually four exams, and homework assignments, and then this thing. I do that each week, and it counts for 2% of their grade. And that's a standard throughout the statistics 221 environment or universe. So, you know, so each one's going to be different. And so this is just example. Take it with a granary of salt, and do your thing. But the critical thing that I want to stress is assess often. You don't have to grade everything that you assess, but assess often in a way that they can get feedback and that they can grow. Whether that gets recorded in their grade, that is entirely up to you. But, yeah, please.
I've given a lot of quizzes this semester, and I have them do it with an iClicker.
Yeah.
And so that's no burden at all to do an assessment on those.
Right.
In fact, when I do them, I have them take the quiz first individually,
Mhm.
and then I have them turn to a partner or with the group and
Yeah.
take the same quiz. And on the midterm feedback, they really enjoyed that interaction with the others during the quiz.
Sure. Yeah. Anytime you get them interacting with each other, and iClicker is great. You record it very quickly. It's very low stakes or low effort on your part. Did I see it? Please.
How do you feel about the effectiveness of students assessing each other? You know, to cut down on the burden on the poor faculty member who's got all these students to assess. Find that useful?
It's useful in two ways. I highly recommend it, but don't have them assess in a way that is beyond their capability of assessing. You need to give them kind of parameters of, okay, I want you to look. So if they're looking at the student's paper, say, okay, I want you to look for just their main idea. Do they stick with their main idea throughout the paper very well? You know, give them some constraints so they can talk about that with each other, and that's helpful. But you don't want to just say, you know, grade it and I'm not going to look at it kind of thing. So it's in a way where they can talk about it. Or if you're having them sit down with each other, say it's a paper, have the person who wrote the paper explain, talk about it, articulate it. That's very helpful, very important for their learning. So I would recommend that kind of exercise. Any other thoughts? Okay, these are things that we can score readily in the environment and setting it up. We'd also like to talk about assessing. We just have a couple more minutes. Assessing in the affective domain a little bit. Here's Carl Sagan. He was an atheist, but here he's talking in a pretty cool way about his passion for his profession. It's sometimes said that scientists are unromantic, that their passion is to figure out robs the world of beauty and mystery. But is it not stirring to understand how the world actually works? That white light is made of colors, that color is the way we perceive the wavelengths of light, that transparent air reflects light, that in so doing it discriminates among the waves, and that the sky is blue for the same reason the sunset is red. It does no harm to the romance of the sunset to know a little bit about it. So he had a passion for what he was doing, even if he couldn't empirically prove that God exists. He had this passion about what he was doing. Now, to pull it back to the words of Mormon, this is in Helaman, and he's talking about what God can do. By the power of his voice did the whole earth shake, yea, by the power of his voice did the foundations rock, even to the very center. And if he say unto the earth, move, it is moved. If he say unto the earth, thou shalt go back, that it lengthen out the day for many hours, it is done. And thus, according to his word, the earth goeth back. And it appeareth unto man that the sun standeth still. Yea, and behold, this is so, for surely it is the earth that moveth, and not the sun. So Copernicus was not the first person to know that our solar system, that the sun is the center of our solar system, not the earth. It's the earth that moves. So 1,000 years before Copernicus, this was known. But it's the passion. So Sagan came from, I see the beauty of the world and it inspires me. Mormon came from, I see the wonder of God and it inspires me. And they're both saying the same thing, but on two different wavelengths in terms of wording and basic understanding. And that's okay. So in the affective domain, we have things that describe what we like about our domain, what we do, these words here. And there are many other words that, why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we teaching this stuff? Why are we researching it and discovering things? When I got my doctorate and I was telling about my kids some things about it, and I was using some big words and saying, okay, now having a doctorate, I can do some research in these things and discover stuff. And so one of my kids said, so you can use big words to talk about things you don't know, right? I said, yeah, that's about it. But there's things beyond that. There's things that you can express to your students in this vein, and you can draw it from them. You can actually assess this stuff from them. Of course, we don't have rulers or thermometers or things that can give us a score on this, but you can get them into an exercise of doing it. So what I like to do, in 30 seconds, you have a half sheet of paper, any paper you have. I'd like you to come up with 2 words in the feeling domain, the affective domain, that you feel about the domain that you're passionate about, your research and your teaching. 2 words. It can be from this list or come up with your own. Okay, I'm going to pull it up short right now. Okay, I've just assessed the affective domain. I've assessed you on it. You've written it down. You can write your name on this thing, hand it in. Of course, I'm not going to grade it against a rubric, but I can get a sense of this, and I can tell you how I feel about learning. I can tell you how I feel about assessment as where we can have a snapshot of where we're at and we can grow. I've just assessed this. Whether or not I will grade it and score you on it, that's up to me, right, as a teacher. But you can assess it. You can teach it and model it, at least, in the context of what you're teaching. Say, I like science because of this. Or I like art because of this. Or nursing, what I can do here in nursing. Or here's what I feel about the study of psychology, how the brain works, how the mind works, and things. And I have a reverence for it. And you say, don't you have a reverence for it? Where is your reverence, students, in this? And just, 5, 10 minutes, and you have it, and you can do that. And blend that in to the outcomes that you have. Not only will they be able to do some things, but they will have exposure to the attitudes. They will have exposure to their own attitudes of how this domain works in their life. So those are just some things to think about as you go. Okay, just in summary, we haven't had too much time. I hope this has been effective for you, and at least in thinking about it. I hope you've taken some personal notes and in what you can continue to do, and we're always open to any questions you have. If you want us to look at specific exams or quizzes, how they're written, how they're performing, that's what we're here for. And so I hope you'll take advantage of that as you go through your very important work in teaching here at BYU.